Afternoon, everyone. My name's Richard Moore, and welcome to the April episode of Business Lincolnshire Live. Now, we started these shows, these monthly live shows, around a year ago now. It's last March we started them, really with the aim of sharing with Greater Lincolnshire and Rutland some of the ideas and some of the support that's available to businesses, and discuss some of the topics that are relevant to business owners across the county. Now, to get involved with the show, if you've joined through the LinkedIn Live chat and the LinkedIn Live event, then you'll see there's a chat area there. You can leave questions live for the guests. You can talk to us through the chat area there. If you're on Facebook, you can do the same by leaving comments, same on YouTube. The show gets streamed out across Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. It's on LinkedIn Live. And we always encourage people to go through the LinkedIn Live event because that's how you can engage with the show live the best. Through the chat facility in there. Now, what we're going to focus on this week and in this month's show is something that's very relevant, I should think, to every business owner that's watching this show, and that's business resilience and the difficulties that we're all facing in business, and probably the likes of which haven't been seen for decades. We've got the impact still of the pandemic that we're coming out of. We've got the effects of Brexit 18 months ago. We've got cyber threats to think about, geopolitical tensions across the world. These are causing supply chain disruptions. There's the energy crisis. Obviously, that's a very relevant thing that's just really starting to gather momentum as we speak. And then we've got talent shortages. We've got climate change. All of these different things are affecting businesses in different ways. So today's show is very timely in that we're going to focus on a lot of these areas and really share some ideas on how you as a business owner can navigate this disruption, future-proof your business, and really prepare yourselves for constant change that's coming along. Now, the show today is going to take more of a panel format. We're going to be joined by two guests, both who've been on live shows before last year. There's Meryl Levington, who's the Business Lincolnshire Business Resilience Specialist, and Andrea Collins, who's the Managing Director of the Global Trade Department. And we're going to run this really to share ideas on how to address some of the issues that we're going to discuss and the support that's available to you as a business. It's a very full show today, so we've got a lot to cover. So what I'm going to do is bring Meryl and Andrea in now and get stuck into the questions that have been sent in. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Meryl. How are you both?
Hi, Richard. Very well, thank you.
Yeah, all good here as well, thanks.
Fabulous. Well, we've had a lot of questions sent in covering a variety of topics. So let's crack on, Andrea, with you. If you want to take the first of these questions, which is very much Brexit focused. The question's: now we're 16 months on from the end of the transition period. How are things for UK companies now that are trading with the EU?
Oh, good one. So yes, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mixed picture, really. I was just doing some research for a client the other day, actually, on looking at the impact of Brexit and how it's impacted EU and UK trade. And depending on the different reports that you read, you get a kind of varied picture. But there's no doubt that goods trade was lower in 2021 than it would have been if we'd stayed in the EU. It was down by something like 16%, which is the equivalent of about 13 billion. Mm-hmm. And there was some 52% of all trade in the first 10 months of last year was with non-EU countries. So we actually now import more from China than we do from Germany, because Germany's always been our biggest import partner, if you like. But there's no doubt that COVID's actually increased the Brexit impact as well. We're seeing companies that were supporting us still struggling to get their head around the UK Trading Cooperation Agreement, trying to adapt their business to comply with that. But there's a lot of talk about goods, and actually it's our opinion that it'll be the services sector that suffers the most over time, right. Because we are a services economy. Mm-hmm. We've got no passporting rights for financial firms under the Trading Cooperation Agreement. We've got no country of origin principle that allowed, certain sectors to trade cross borders while complying with UK law rather than individual member states' law. And we're seeing, obviously, entry requirements for the movement of natural persons or employees are different in each member state. So it's a bit of a minefield to navigate. But if we're thinking about the main issues that are still rearing their head, rules of origin is a big one. So obviously, each preferential trade agreement has product-specific rules of origin for all commodities across the tariff. And they're complex to understand. And some companies might get to a point where they think that, I've done, that means that the goods are of UK origin. But actually, the insufficient processing clause can supersede that. We've got bilateral accumulation in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, but that only applies for goods traded between the UK and the EU. So some companies may not be able to count EU raw materials as originating for the purposes of other trade agreements. And we've seen a lot of goods returned because the declaration of origin hasn't been made correctly. So within the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, there's a specific phrase or statement that you have to make. It's called the Statement on Origin. And if that is incorrect or missing, then the customer is going to incur third country duty when the goods arrive. They refuse to pay that and the goods are returned. So that's been a real nightmare. And I think also from a compliance perspective, HMRC, doing some kind of audit, are going to expect full and up-to-date bill of materials together with origin calculations for each commodity that a UK company exports. So there's compliance issues there as well. B2C trade has suffered. So obviously, when we left the EU, we lost the distance selling thresholds. Low value consignment relief on VAT was removed as well. So you had knee-jerk reactions from some UK companies that were registering in each member state for VAT, which has brought terrible cost implications and bureaucracy. But we've now got the one-stop shop, which I have to say is working. There's been some hiccups around not stating the correct one-stop shop number. But it basically means that companies that want to sell goods into the EU to consumers, they're able to do that so long and account for the VAT, so long as those goods are under 150 euros threshold. And obviously, if they're selling by platforms such as Amazon, it's actually Amazon that's accounting for that VAT. So it's working. But again, that's just one of the things that we support clients on, those registrations and understanding how it all works. What else?
The European Commission link in there to the one-stop shop.
That's perfect, Richard.
It's also in the chat if anyone wants to click on the link. And you also shared this HM Government UK transition guide as well in there on import and export.
Yeah, actually on that matter, so that makes me think about kind of customs documentation and border control. So I don't know whether you remember, but at the beginning, straight after the transition end, the UK government kind of phased in import control. So it allowed traders to defer import declarations and any duty and VAT that was due on goods that they were bringing in. Now those companies are being pursued in respect of those import customs declarations from last year. So it's kind of companies that maybe weren't keeping the right records are falling over themselves to try and be compliant. We've still got no equivalence in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement for those sanitary and phytosanitary goods. So there's kind of like meat, animals and product of animal origin, or plant seeds and some kind of woods. So that's causing huge problems, really. The import controls were phased and pushed back all throughout last year because our ports, our systems, and essentially our importers weren't ready. But by July this year, we'll have full UK import controls with pre-notifications via iPaths, required certification, and routing through border control posts where there's like further controls or further checks made. So there's a lot going on the import side of things, but there's no doubt that lack of equivalence has caused, significant costs to exporters and moving forward to EU exporters as well, who are trying to get goods into the UK. Why I suggested the border operating model was because it's a great document. It was updated in December. It's got some fantastic process flows that show how goods move through the import and the export process, and those kind of notifications and documentation that's required at each stage. It's really, really good. Was somebody going to say something there? Did I talk over someone?
No.
Okay. The only other things I would mention is the Northern Ireland Protocol, that awful thing that was never going to work. That continues to be a challenge. So if you remember, Northern Ireland is kind of suspended in this hybrid model somewhere between the UK and the EU. So it's still within the EU single market for the purpose of goods, but it's in the UK customs territory. So that's been a nightmare. The sanitary and phytosanitary issues have probably been the most problematic, as have accounting for VAT. But the negotiations continue, basically. But it's an absolute nightmare. As you remember, kind of goods coming into GB from Northern Ireland it's unfettered access. There's no controls. But trying to get goods from GB into Northern Ireland is a bit of a headache. And then finally, it's just the regulatory regimes and bodies. If you remember, we're now operating 2 different regulatory regimes and body structures. So even though it's early days and UK, much of EU regulation was grandfathered over to the UK, and there hasn't been time for us to diverge, it is complex in so much as if you've got a product that you want to place on the EU market and the UK market, there are different bodies to report to and different regulatory controls to abide by. So the one that's looming is probably the CE mark and the UK CA mark. So that will really take effect from January 23, where you'll be unable to put any product on the GB marketplace unless it is UK CA marked. So ultimately, it's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of cost for traders that they just really didn't need against the backdrop of everything else that's going on.
So the message is, if your business is import-export, then you need to just keep abreast of everything and how it's changing, and just keep in touch with people like yourself.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, well, just conscious of time, we will keep moving forward. I'm going to move now, Meryl, onto the energy crisis and bring you into the conversation on that. So the question sent in was, what can businesses do to address price rises in the energy market? I think we're all being impacted domestically and commercially by this.
Yeah, I think the problem is commercially, Richard, that a lot of organisations, a lot of the energy brokers now will not allow people to fix tariffs when they're coming out of it. They're putting them on an open tariff. So I think the thing to do is really, first of all, for a business to look at its energy use. Where can you save? Or can you get yourself moved to a tariff, something like, the equivalent of your domestic economy 7, where it's cheaper through the night? So are there things that you could do around that, around shift patterns and things? But really, first of all, look at your energy usage. Have you taken advantage of having things like LED lighting put in your factories or in your office space that can really just pay for themselves, within a very, very short space of time? Look at where you might be wasting energy. Are there machines, lights, systems being left on that could be switched off? Have you got a building management system? And I think it's important to look at all of these things. So building management systems now can be very efficient, quite cheap bits of software and sensors to put in that can allow you to look at your energy usage and look at where you might be able to do things more efficiently and more effectively. And I think the other thing is to start thinking about green energy. Energy prices are not going to go down, particularly gas. And the other thing is, gas is running out. Now is the time for businesses to start thinking about how they can perhaps generate their own power or move to some more sustainable sources. So, and there is support out there. Lincolnshire particularly has taken a lead, on green energy. There's been a scheme running out of North Lincolnshire for some time now. There's a focus at the minute on green tourism, but, there's support for all businesses around this green agenda. So start to look at, solar panels, battery backups, air and ground source heat pumps, these more energy efficient and sustainable, because that will not only help you with your energy prices in the long term, it may not in the short term help you bring energy prices down, but it will help you stabilize your costs in the long term. And particularly if you're going to start looking at generating your own energy, excuse me, even on a small office complex, it can be very efficient to put some solar panels and some battery backup in there, and very quickly you'll start to recoup some of those costs, the outlay of putting that in. And what I would say is, whatever you do, go with a battery backup solution, because that allows you to store the energy that you've generated, and you may then be able to either sell that back to the grid, or save it until you need it, because we don't need the heating on a beautiful sunny day in the summer, but we will generate a lot of electricity on those days. And if we can save it and sell it back to the grid, or use it when we do need it, we become a business becomes much more efficient. And I think there's a lot of options out there The issue is not to just jump on the bandwagon, it's to get that proper advice and to start looking at how you are using energy, what times of the day, where your peaks and troughs are across the seasons. You know, if you've got a production cycle that uses a lot more electricity at the start, say, you know, what's the best solution for you going to be? So take that proper advice and get a solution that works for you, and find somebody that will give you the information and advice on the grants that you can access. You know, for example, in the rural, you know, the rural and farms, there are different grants for them as opposed to a manufacturing sector. And the technology is changing all the time. But what I do know is that the battery storage options are huge. And if you've got space around your business premises, there are some really exciting innovations that you can access, you know, where you can put a whole sort of district heat network in something that's the equivalent size of a shipping container, you know, and that could feed not just your business, but local houses around you. Or, you know, we're seeing there's a fantastic scheme going in Peterborough at the minute, for example, new build of a school that's going to put these sort of new shipping container type systems in, and then it's going to feed into the local housing estates that are around the perimeter, to a hotel on the perimeter, and to a small business park as well. So, you know, I think don't just think individually about your business. If you're on a business park, try and think collectively, you know, get an action plan together, or speak to the business park management team and see what they can do to bring you together collectively to try and look at some of these more efficient green energy solutions where you can start to generate your own power that will save in the long term. Yes, it's investment up front, I'm aware of that, but it really will save you in the long term, and it will also help you meet some of those net zero requirements that we're envisaging businesses will have to report on. You know, large businesses already have to report on their carbon footprint and their carbon action plans. I'm envisaging that, like pensions, small businesses will have to do this in the not too distant future as well. So to get ahead of the game on that now, you know, now I think is the time to just start looking at energy and how we use it, and how, more importantly, how you as a business can generate it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to come back down, are the energy prices, anytime soon? So as I say, it's a good point for businesses to start thinking like that. I've shared the green tourism. There's visit Lincolnshire.com website that went live, has loads of resources on what Meryl was just talking about as well. So let's move back to Andrea and talk a bit about supply chains, Andrea. I know that's very relevant to a lot of businesses who watch these shows. So I'll just move you back into the screen, and the question says that it seems global supply chains are still hampered in the COVID aftermath. Is this true? And what can companies do to alleviate some of the issues they may be experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's no doubt that global supply chains have been pushed to the brink, but it was a bit of a wake-up call because they've always lacked resilience. There was a few things that kind of happened all at once. You had a surge in demand for physical goods, so there was a sharp shift in spending from services to what we call consumer durables, so cars or household appliances with kind of like a long life. If you look at the US, for example, you know, spending on durables was 40% higher in October 21 than it was 2 years previous. But then I think COVID has impacted labour. So there's been labour issues. And, you know, there's no doubt that there's been some products that have emerged as being most problematic in terms of shortages and so on. And they're kind of like semiconductors, tech hardware and industrials. Coupled with that, we're seeing transport costs at unprecedented highs. We're seeing bottlenecks continue. I don't think that quarantine and travel restrictions have helped. They've continued to cause havoc. And then, of course, we've had this dire shortage of drivers in the haulage industry. So not just Brexit related, but also limited succession planning in that industry as well. So kind of Brexit coincided with a lot of retirement also. And then we've seen astronomical rises in raw materials. So if you look at wood, for example, the price of lumber skyrocketed last year, and then it kind of calmed towards the end of the year, which is kind of lumber prices are cyclical like that anyway. But then early this year, they've almost trebled again. And obviously that has a knock-on effect in industries such as construction and so on. But thinking about what you can do, when we're working with clients, it becomes apparent that there's not an awful lot of strategy deployed when they're kind of, sourcing their supply. So there's no kind of like customs duties and supply chain mapping. And it can be really helpful to understand and map the potential flows of goods to understand the full impact of those fixed and variable costs on your margins. So you might find that actually more expensive goods closer to home are more economically viable when you see the whole picture. So when you're taking into account transport, duties, taxes, documentary requirements, and so on. So quite a lot with clients, we will do a full kind of like supply chain mapping exercise and overlay with those kind of costs. And quite quickly it becomes apparent that actually, sourcing from the other side of the world because labour costs are lower may actually prove to be more expensive than sourcing from closer to home. I think also if COVID and Brexit have taught us anything, is that we need more resilience in our supply chains. So we need multiple suppliers, really. So if you think about it, China is responsible for something like 20% of global supply. And UK supply chains and global supply chains fell over when COVID hit China. So you have to kind of spread your risk and source from multiple regions. And then the other thing, when you see rising costs, is use the facilitations and simplifications that the HMRC offer. So they've got, if you're thinking about import, they've got a wealth of mechanisms by which you can reduce or remove entirely duty and VAT on goods brought into the UK for certain purposes. So be it for repair or for processing to make finished goods. And that can have a massive impact on cash flow and margins. And so many companies just don't know that they're available or that they qualify for them. So I think that's another important thing. I can see that you've just put up that document there, or that link to the gov.uk website.
In the chat as well. That's
it's a great place to start. But there's lots of things that we can do to kind of, mitigate the problems that we're experiencing in supply chains. That's just a taster, really. Meryl might have something to add as well, because you've done a lot of work on this.
Yeah, I think also it's getting businesses to think about what could they onshore. We're seeing an increasing onshoring in certain sectors. So could a business develop its own supply chain or use alternative materials and products? I've just been speaking this morning, for example, to a business here in the UK that's developing plastics from plants. So for plastic manufacturers, it looks like on the horizon we've got some environmentally friendly plastics, and I know that they're not the only one. So so even in things that in the past we've thought have to be sourced from overseas, and there's no doubt that certain raw materials and minerals that we don't have here do have to be, but for things that aren't bound geographically like that, what can you onshore, or can you, together with other people in your supply chain, develop a business in your own right, set up to become the supplier of others by starting to produce some of those goods yourselves, or looking at an alternative materials? So if you've used wood in the past, could you use plastic, or vice versa? There's a lot of expertise in this country in steel and iron. Could that be tapped into? So I think it's thinking outside of the box, and as Andrea said, it's not just that strategic thinking, it's also that creative thinking. And there's some great projects on offer where they will put a creative in your business, to work with you to help you think outside of the box. Or Andrea and I both have support programs that people can join to help you just do some of that strategic and creative thinking, to just think differently about your supply chain and how you manage it and your approach to your products. If you're a manufacturer, how you drive that product out of the factory door. Is it that you, as I say, that I think onshoring is I don't think enough businesses are thinking carefully about that. What can they get on their doorstep? And as Andrea said, they look and think it's expensive, but actually when you factor in those other costs, it can actually be the cheapest alternative.
And the other thing is the sustainability of buying locally, isn't it? Not shipping it. There's going to be a lot more emphasis put on that as well as just the cost side. So you can see how supply chains are going to change over the next decade, and I think that sustainability will have an impact on that as well.
Yeah, and I think coming back to the net zero, if you can reduce some of the transport miles by looking at how you can buy locally, or adapting the materials that you're using and the way that you're buying, again, it all adds into that, that carbon footprint reduction and increasing your environmental sustainability as well. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm just keeping an eye on time, 25 minutes in. So you mentioned in that, Andrea, about the talent situation, the recruitment, the shortage of skills. Meryl, do you want to talk a bit more about that? There seems to be a real difficulty in recruiting and retaining staff. I think in certain areas and certain sectors are really struggling with this. Have you got any advice you can give on recruitment and talent?
Yeah, again, I think it's taking that step back and looking strategically. So, many companies underestimate the need to people plan. I think because there has been a good supply in the labour market in the past, people have become complacent. So, get a people strategy in and start to look at what you've got internally. I think too many companies, when they lose somebody, their first thought is, we'll recruit. Well, actually, the first thought should be take a step back. What skills have you already got in-house that could be redeployed? Who have you got in-house that is actually desperate for that opportunity to up their skills and move forward? And again, there's lots of support to help companies do that. There are skill support for the workforce packages that they can tap into through local colleges and providers that will provide, free at source training for certain key skills, particularly in sort of supervision and certain engineering, construction and manufacturing processes, driving, you name it. In the key sectors, there is support there with free training packages that businesses can access. So, look first at what you've got in-house and who you can develop and who you can promote. I think then look at things like apprenticeships. The National Apprenticeship Service is really good, and don't be put off by the thought that an apprentice might be a 16-year-old straight out of school. Anybody can come on an apprenticeship. It's age neutral nowadays. So, you could recruit somebody that's desperate for a career change, and is really willing and passionate and will come into your business to do that. So I think when you think about apprenticeships, don't just think that it's going to be 16, 18, 20-year-olds. Apprentices offer everybody now. You've even got degree and higher degree apprenticeships that cover, you can do an MBA as an apprenticeship nowadays, for example. So I think don't limit your thinking around that. And the National Apprenticeship Service and local apprenticeship providers, across Lincolnshire, again, there are some great providers there who will help you find that right recruit and get them into the business. The only thing I would say is if you do go down the apprenticeship route, beware that you do have to guarantee that you will employ that person for a year and a day. Contractually, you are obliged to do that. Obviously, they may choose to leave. You can't stop them. But from the employer's perspective, there is an onus on you there. But, and also an apprenticeship can give somebody a really strong career route through a business. So I think, don't discount the staff that you've got and training them, and then apprenticeships. And then I think look at the offer that you've got. People aren't just motivated by money. Money is just one factor. And I know I'm seeing salary wars, particularly in the IT sector, and in the construction sector, where people are looking for those charge hands and the more senior, managerial roles within the sector there. I'm seeing wage wars going on, but that's not sustainable. So I think look at the whole package, take a step back, flexible and hybrid working. There's a great report come out by the CIPD today with the latest evidence about hybrid and flexible working practices. And that shows that many employers aren't asking their staff, they're just assuming. So, talk to staff about what they want so you can get an idea. Recently I was working with a business where they chose they tried to get a marketing person, and then they reshaped their thinking and they offered a contract for school hours and school term times only, and were inundated with overqualified, really professional people who just saw that as an opportunity to change their lives and work around their children in a more effective way. So, things like that sort of rethinking about hours, rethinking about the flexible and the hybrid offer that you have. As I said, it's not just money that's the option. People are wanting a better work-life balance. So, what is the package that you're offering? Other things to consider are looking at sick pay schemes. People have been very aware of losing out on money, and if they can't work because of COVID, it can be very cost effective to have a staff sick pay scheme put in place. It can cost you as little as £1 per employee per week, or you can look at some of these sick pay schemes that will guarantee they'll cover an employee's wage for up to a year if they're ill. That then relieves you as the employer of having to pay that wage. You can reuse that money to buy in a temp or recruit somebody or upskill somebody, and they again can cost, for a small business. I don't have staff at the minute, but when I had staff, I think it was costing me about £25 a month. To have a policy like that in place. It gave me peace of mind, and it gave my staff peace of mind that if they were off sick, they weren't rushing back to work before they had to. So, there's just a couple of ideas, birthdays off, flexibility around hours. Think about those school term time. School holidays are the biggest headache for parents to get childcare, but often they're a quiet time in the business. So could it be an idea to give somebody an annualized salary, but actually they have unpaid time off in school holidays, over and above the standard holiday allowance. So, I think it's thinking creatively and talk to staff about what motivates people to work for you. Don't just think about the salary, think about the culture, the benefits, and how you might be able to employ somebody creatively that suits you, but also gives them greater flexibility and a better work-life balance.
Yeah, I think culture, you hit it on the head. I think people nowadays, certainly graduates coming out, are looking for companies that align with their ethics, their approach to life. And I think culture is a big part of that, isn't it? They tend to pick companies that they relate to and want to go and work for.
Yeah, you're very right there, Richard. And I think you've touched on the graduates there as well. The University of Lincoln has a fantastic internship scheme, so talk to the university. They've got it's award-winning scheme that they have there, all sorts of offers. So they'll have students who are looking for a year out in industry. It could be an opportunity for a business there to have somebody at a really competitive rate. Often there's a grant that goes with that. So sometimes it won't cost the employer very much at all other than their time. And it gives you a real chance to try before you buy. They'll have other internship schemes that go on over 12 weeks or 6 months. Look at what's on offer, because that there are many graduates who need work, and some will want to stay in the area because they're based there. Mature students who don't want to move for a graduate role. So talk to the university. Talk to the local FE colleges, because they again will have people on vocational courses that need that work experience. And again, there are internships and schemes and that you can offer there. And I think the Kickstarter scheme, not going to be around for much longer, but it's still there. Again, that allows you to employ somebody who's currently unemployed, and 27 hours a week are paid for by the government at minimum wage. Again, it gives you that great opportunity to bring somebody into the workplace and try before you buy. And I know, again, I've been working with a number of businesses across the area that have had real success in doing that. So I think, again, look at what schemes and support are out there. And just to come back to graduates, are you fit for purpose? Sometimes for a business it's about taking a step back. What I see with graduates now in the recruitment market is very much what you said, Richard. They're almost interviewing the company. So before they will apply, they want to know what your green policy is, what you're doing to work towards net zero. Are you ethical in your recruitment practices, your employment practices, and how you run your business? So, if that's the sort of candidate that you need to recruit, take a step back and look at how appealing you are to that part of the market.
Fabulous. And there's an event you were telling me about in May over in Woodall Spa. I'm just going to share the screen and then we can make sure everybody's aware of this. There we go.
Yeah, and just to make you aware, Richard, so the CIPD is the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. That is the professional body for HR and OD people. They have mentoring available. They have great staff, within the branch. The branch in Lincolnshire is a very active branch. They'll have all sorts of HR consultants and recruitment people there. So if you need expertise, an event such as this can be a great source of information, or even just contacting the local branch. They're a really great bunch. And this event, no magic wand, it's a free event at Woodall Spa in the evening. Get yourself along. It'll be good networking and also some good hints and tips as well.
Yeah, and you can search that on Eventbrite, or we've put again the link in the chat. So if you're on chat at the moment, you'll be able to click on that link and register for that. Highly recommended. Right, so we're on 35 minutes, so we're doing well. Let's go on to probably the biggest subject we can talk about today, which is sustainability. Andrea, do you want to come back in on this? Let's talk a bit about sustainability. And the question that was sent in was, looking further afield, what are some of the key issues that may start to impact global trade? And I think that's relating to sustainability for businesses as well.
Right, okay, so there's some kind of generic changes, and then I can touch on sustainability as well. But I mean, essentially there are seismic shifts in globalization at the minute. So we're seeing trade in services growing faster than trade in goods. So more than 60% faster over the last decade. IT services and telecoms are growing 3 times faster than that. So real shifts there. We're seeing global value chains becoming more knowledge intensive. So low skill labor is kind of a less important factor in production. The emergence of new technology, AI, so that's transforming labor intensive manufacturing into more capital intensive manufacturing. So that has huge implications for those lower income countries. Value chains, they're becoming more regional and less global. So China and other emerging markets now are actually consuming more of what they produce. So their exports have dropped in relation to how much they actually consume as nations themselves. And then we're seeing huge shift in the geography of global demand. So more advanced economies like the UK and the EU have dominated demand to date, but they're now starting to estimate that emerging markets will consume almost 66% of the world's manufactured goods. So there's things like cars, building products, machinery, and so on by 2025. And that's principally because they're experiencing a greater share of global wealth. There's rising disposable income in those regions, and they've got an increasing working age population. So there's demographic changes in there that are feeding into that. But yeah, coming back to what you said about sustainability, Richard, I think in my opinion, and those of others that I consult, sustainability and that drive towards net zero is going to have a huge impact on global trade. So Merrill's a really good source of knowledge on the wider subject of sustainability, but I think in global trade terms, if I just cover those off, we're seeing a rise in the kind of conscious consumer and business. So they're making decisions on brands based on their sustainability values and environmental credentials, and they're more interested in products that protect the environment rather than those that destroy it. And as we push towards net zero, is it really feasible that we continue to source goods from the other side of the world? Should we be looking, as Merrill said, about, onshoring? Yeah. And I think fundamentally, most climate action incentives currently consist of more carrot than stick. This is going to change as pressures rise. And I think, if you think governments have a lot of policies and mechanisms at their disposal to shape global trade, we've got things like anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that we have a carbon duty. So where we're importing goods from those far-flung countries, that we pay more duty. And bearing in mind that a lot of the companies that Merrill and I support are SMEs and micro businesses, they make up imperative links in those large global supply chains, and they're going to be forced to change their practices or essentially be replaced. So they really need to get ahead of time or ahead of the game, really. And the two really interesting kind of sources of information on this is the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So they provide kind of like a framework for safeguarding the environment and sharing global prosperity. And global trade is very much positioned as a principal lever for driving that essential change. And if every company, ourselves, we're a micro business, if we can just adopt 2 to 3 of those goals and commit to prioritizing them within our business, the collective power that SMEs have on a global stage is massive. So we ourselves can bring about the essential change. And then another really important report, or a really good source of information, is the UK government published a green trade report last year, which is kind of call to action for UK companies. So it talks a lot about the impacts of not greening trade. So talks about natural disasters and their impact on global GDP. Potentially that could shrink by 10% by 2050. Talks about decarbonisation and free trade, calls upon UK businesses to seize opportunities on the global stage for green, innovative technologies. So it's estimated that the global export market for low carbon products could be worth 1.8 trillion by 2050. So it's a huge opportunity. And then it talks about the importance of free trade and kind of refocusing government trade policies to mandate fair trade as well. So again, sharing that global prosperity. Lots more is included, and it's going to become such an increasingly important topic. And in my view, it's going to change the shape of global trade over the coming decades. So I think sustainability is going to be massive. But again, Meryl's a great source of knowledge on sustainability wider outside of just the trading landscape. I don't know whether you've got anything to add, Meryl.
Yeah, I think I'd start with supply chains. We're seeing some of the larger providers now looking at their supply chains and the materials that they're using and again, looking for those alternative products, the green plastics, the biodegradable bags, the more sustainable, encouraging you to repair rather than replace. So I think, SMEs that are in supply chains, particularly with larger organizations, are going to feel a push for that. I'm seeing it already in the car industry, in the motor trade industry, people who are in that supply chain, providing parts into the car sector. Nissan, I happen to live in the northeast of England, and Nissan on our doorstep. I'm seeing that happening to the supply chains around here. They're moving from tier 1 to tier 0.5. Nissan are generating their own electricity. They're starting to expect their supply chain to do the same and to look at that sustainable and that move towards green vehicles, electric vehicle usage. And I'm also seeing that rise of ESG. So, when you bid for contracts with public sector organisations or larger organisations, they're asking you to talk about your ethics and your approach to net zero, your approach to the community where you're based. So it's that, I think, again, in order to be sustainable, businesses need to start to look at every part of their operation from that perspective, and that's where we can help them on the resilience program. It's taking that step back, looking at every system and every process in your business to see what you could do more effectively, using less electricity, using better materials, to be more environmentally friendly in your approach, to running that business. And then it's looking at, getting people to audit their supply chains, how in order to sustain your business. If we look at business sustainability for an individual business rather than that global idea of sustainability, what can you do in your business to ensure that you've got a healthy supply of cash to bankroll that business forward, that your procedures and systems and the machines that you use and the processes that you use are efficient and effective, that you're keeping ahead of your competitors, that you're productive. And just on the productivity, there is again some great research coming out of CIPD combined with 8 UK universities around productivity. And one of the things that's showing is that investing in your people and their well-being is the key in many businesses to increasing productivity. Okay, so making sure, so in terms of making sure that your business is sustainable, people are your biggest asset. What are you doing to make sure that your staff, that their mental health is looked after as well as their physical health? And again, there are programs in place to support micro businesses to do that. So the county sports partnerships have programs where they can work with employers to help them look at the mental and physical health and well-being of staff. They will come and help you put a program in place and get people moving, but also to look at their mental health and well-being as well. So I think, in terms of sustainability, what are you doing to look after your own staff and your own people? How long is it since you had a staff survey? How happy are your staff? Are they aware of your concerns? They may have ideas, that can help you solve problems in the business. So I think engaging with staff for me is the number one, and then auditing your systems and processes. So, what are you doing to move towards more sustainable supply chains, ensuring that your cash flow is sound and solid? Packaging materials that you're using, what are you doing there? Again, we know that there's shortages and cardboard prices and packing prices are going up and up and up. So what can you do that helps you with recycling, and helps you with your sustainability, but also might be more innovative? What can you do to reduce packaging, to reduce waste, and to really just look at your business as a whole? taking that step back, looking at how you can make each individual component of your business sustainable. And that's what we do on the Business Resilience Programme. We've got webinars and seminars that people can dip into, as has Andrea, got support available for businesses there. So I think keep an eye on the business, the Business Lincolnshire, Business Gateway website. There's all sorts of support out there for businesses to access to help you take that step back and look more strategically, because often we're working in the business and it's helping you to take that step back and work on the business, either individually or collectively with a senior management team for a slightly larger business, to look at what you can do to weather the storms that are hitting businesses now. So, reducing costs, managing cash flow in innovative ways, using R&D tax credits if you haven't already done that. That can bring a much needed cash into a business where they've been developing products and things. So I think take that step back and look at what you can do.
Absolutely. And all those things will help you attract talent as well. If you're seen as one of those proactive businesses who's managing their cash flow, who's giving some stability to their team, and also I think the United Nations goals, the 17 goals. I was on a business accelerator last year, and he was adamant that if you had things that you stood for alongside making money, and he actually advocated picking 2 goals, one for the heart and one for the head for your business. He said, because people align with that, people connect with you, and when you're recruiting people, showing that you're actively promoting those goals and really, raising money and putting effort into those goals is a really powerful recruitment tool as well. So it's just outside money. Thank you both of you for a really interesting show. I think we've touched on so many different topics, but you've given some great advice, some great resources. Anything you want to leave people with? Andrea, have you got anything on trade that you want to leave people with?
No, I think just as Meryl said, there is a lot of support. We're both delivering kind of phase 3 of the support for Business Lincolnshire now. So the Global Trade Department, we're still delivering part of phase 2. So any clients that are on this call that we're supporting, thank you so much for your patience. We're working through stuff. But then phase 3 will focus a lot more on some of the things that we've touched on today, like greening global trade, trade compliance, custom special procedures. We've really taken what we've learned about businesses in Lincolnshire
events kind of here on Eventbrite as well. They're all upcoming, are they? These are in May, I see.
Yeah, they're upcoming. We're going to be adding more. And as Meryl says, both of us will be adding our events and so on to the Business Lincolnshire website and also the Business Resilience website as well. So there's various different ways to access those webinars and one-to-one support and so on.
Fabulous. Meryl, any last words from you?
Yeah, just to say, get in touch if you need help and support, and don't be afraid, to go back to a business advisor. If you haven't spoke to your business advisor for a while, get in touch with them, or get in touch with Andrea and myself. We can signpost you. If we're not the right person for your business, we can signpost you to sources of support and advice and guidance that are. And, we have a saying here in the Northeast, shy Ben's getting out, so if you don't ask, you won't get. And Andrea's laughing because she's also originally from the Northeast, so she gets that. And so I think, don't be afraid to ask, because, you never know what it might uncover.
No, fabulous. Great advice. And yeah, I think if anyone who's in business, just be proactive. These things I think the last few years has shown us these things are happening as unlikely as we think they're going to be. There's things always coming up around the corner in business. That's what life's like. And the more prepared you are for them, the more you'll be resilient to them and the impact on your business. So thank you for today's show. Thank you both of you for the show. I'll just drop you out now, and then we'll just wind up the show and look forward to the next show. So the next show is Tuesday, the 24th of May at 12 noon. It's going to be all about scaling up. So taking your business to the next level, how we grow our businesses. So really interesting. So start your questions coming in as soon as you like. You'll see the event go up on LinkedIn. You can then send messages to us through direct messages. You can leave comments whenever we post it on LinkedIn itself. Just leave comments in there, send your questions in to us, and we'll answer as many as we can on scaling up. We're going to have some good guests on that show. So look forward to seeing you on the 24th of May at 12 noon. Take care and see you then.